All right, let's look into some more foolishness here on this site called Black Omnipotence. I think it should be renamed, but let's look at this first. Egyptian Caucasian theory destroyed once and for all, y'all. Oh no. Well, I better put my big boy pants on. Let's see what he has to offer here. Oh, so he's going to show somebody in the early stages of world geography, figuring out who's who and where's what, and once we figured out the polar people and things, and kind of had a gist of how it all came about and weren't going under a biblical model anymore. This man would have been a witch just a few hundred years before this, but George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel here, he was right around the 1800s or shortly after he was became into prominence and stuff, and then died, I think in his late 50s or something, early 60s. But here's a picture of him here, and here's the thing that's written so small. They should have done something better than this. But I separated Egypt from Africa. Now, this is not a quote. This is what somebody is trying to say about him. And of course, you can see White History Month posted across his forehead. Of course, we have Black History Month. We don't really have a White History Month. Strangely, if we did, it'd probably give white people too much pride whenever you would compare. But I separated Egypt from Africa, moved it to a place I made up, called the Middle East. Now, that's a strange statement. Did he make it up? Is he a god? Or no, he just called it a name, because there's the Far East, and there's the Near East, and then there's the Middle East. And so he names these three areas so we can talk about them, and he tells you what countries are in each one, and then he talks about them. But somehow this is ooh. But anyhow, let's go. He called it the Middle East to advance the idea that blacks were subhuman. Well, why would he do that? Let's continue. Detached from civilization, had no history to justify the institution of slavery. Oh, so he used all this to justify the institution of slavery because this was still before the 1850s, whenever it was abolished. Well, no, these people were trying to figure out how civilization it all came about, and you can of course see the pyramids and the people that were involved with them, the Caucasian Egyptians, who had blue eyes, much like this man here, on quite a few of even the earliest of statues. We'll probably get to that here shortly. But also, they aren't really related to the people that are currently there now. And genetics has shown this, and so that's kind of a strange thing, and it tries to be hidden, but black people act like, oh, they're hiding it's black people. Well, the big leap you'd have to make after all this is, how are sub-Saharan West Africans that are primitives related to any of this? And the answer is, well, they're not. Well, what about the biblical people? No, they're not mentioned in the Bible. The Bible's all about Caucasians. It really doesn't mention India people or Asians or Eskimos or Amerindians or anything like that. They, the biblical model is kind of like a four pillars and got a globe over it and everything, and they release water out of a sky. The space is full of water and things, and we've kind of realized we're kind of past that concept now. But the whole thing about the Bible was all about a people in an area and how humanity had come about, and that was all Caucasian people, and quite a few of those had blue eyes, like the Sumerians, where the Bible actually originates and comes from. Even Abraham was from Ur, so we can go from there, I guess, on it. But none of this was done to justify slavery. Slavery came about much later than all the history that led up to this, and this is just somebody noting things. And then, hey, there's these primitive people. He also noted the Amerindian people and how primitive they were, and the juxtaposition of the two, separated. But anyhow, he says these lies became educational standards throughout the Western world. Well, the Western world had educational standards. The sub-Saharans didn't really have much going on. They do now. They've had a lot of help and assistance and billions of dollars in aid and so on. And the strange thing is videos like this are made by westernized black people from West Africa that didn't have anything to do with Egyptians or any of the things that they try to attach themselves to, and they make up videos like this trying to discredit white people who actually did bring all of humanity. And I heard they can fly now. Yeah, it's something about that. Let's continue though. But these are terms we use today, so it's something we can understand. It's just a geographical idea. So he says the debate over race of the ancient Egyptians intensified during the movement to abolish slavery in the United States. I wouldn't say necessarily so. There really wasn't much of a question, but there was some. I think people got deluded because of Bantu and people that came from the slave trade that were in that area at the time. But he says, as arguments relating to the justifications for slavery increasingly asserted the historical, mental, and physical inferiority of the black people. I don't think we've ever said that they were really physically inferior. Well, I mean, if you're looking to jump a little bit higher and all those things, of course, now we can make bridges and all that. You can get bypassed it. We made bikes; they go faster than anyone can run, and we motorized them and so on. It just keeps going from there. But I heard they can fly now. All right, sorry I mentioned that. Just checking. Anyhow, but mental capabilities and low IQs and things are something they really do not want to get into a conversation about. But it kind of shows that they haven't been in the ball game for as long as some other people perhaps have. And it's just really a reality of things. But they don't want to be looked on upon that way. And I don't know any way to change history other than to lie. And that's no way to live. And so you're really never going to be able to get past that. It seems like everybody else can get past it. In fact, the Caucasians that do all this science tell you readily about Neanderthals. And hey, look at all these primordial sediments. And hey, these people were living in these little things and all this type of stuff. No problem whatsoever. The problem is it was thousands and thousands of years ago instead of still going on to this day. Anyhow, he tells you, for example, in 1851, so towards the end of this, John Campbell directly challenged the claims by Champollion and others regarding the evidence for a black Egypt. Yeah, anybody that ever said that was only a few. He's going to try to point out every single one of them, I'm sure. He tells you, asserting, there is one great difficulty to my mind and an insurmountable one, which is that the advocates of the Negro civilization of Egypt do not attempt to account for how this civilization was lost. He tells you later, Egypt progressed, and why was because it was Caucasians. He's telling you that whenever you go in and you look at all the stuff, Champollion himself, whenever he went, like people like to try to tout that, and how whenever they went and saw the Sphinx, and he said, how could you these ancient black people, because he saw a bunch of real swarthy and black people and a lot of mulatto and admixed people there. But that was thinking that the same people standing in front of him might be the same people from the ancients. He recounted himself once he came inside, and then his brother and that was the brother of the other one. I think he'll get to that too here. But so why? Well, it's because it was a Caucasian society. We'll look into this here in just a moment, but I just want to go into what this guy's trying to say. I mean, any of this is fairly easy refutable. He goes, if you're confused about this whole thing, let me just summarize. Yes, white people actually think they were ancient Egyptians. And the sad thing about how he throws that in there is anybody else in humanity other than a West African primitive who has an inferiority complex, imagine that if you're confused about this, the whole thing, let me just summarize the whole thing that we're talking about tonight is that yes, West African primitives, illiterate pre-Stone Age people that really haven't done anything are saying that they built the pyramids, that they was kings. Some of them also say they were the Hebrews of the Bible, and they even wear these funny clown suits and stand around street corners yelling at white people. It's kind of disgusting. In fact, by kinda, I mean a bunch. But let's continue. No one keeps them in check, so this thing just goes on, and they make up their own racism and then get mad about lies. So, and if you thought that it couldn't get any more stupid, then they already are. Now he says, and so I just reflect that as here, I'm a mirror, I'm rubber and you're glue, bounce off me and stick to you. And if you didn't think that the West African primitives could get any more low IQ and stupider acting than they already are, let's nicely say, so now he starts showing you haplogroups and things about Bantus and Nilo-Saharans and so on, and how they don't really connect to the same tree. And there are other tree versions of this that are much more accurate. This is just a breakdown of some of the subclads and stuff that come out of here. And that there is some admix mixed back into, and it's looked at as being a return to Africa from people that had already changed. So here is the list that they always want to show, that I think I've been over just about every one of these, but European scholars who say they were black. No, the scholars don't say they were black, and they don't say the Egyptians were black either. In fact, Herodotus, a famous one, makes clear distinction on the fact that they're not black people, and that the Caucasians, way up near Georgia, way up in the Caucasus Mountains, are actually the same people, and that they have darker skin and curly hair, but that's nothing different than a lot of people around, including himself, but not the darker skin. They pride themselves on staying pale, and that didn't show them anything. It was the way they did their linen, and that they had practiced circumcision since way back when, and it seems like only a few people really had that going on in the way back when time. Diodorus, that's been debunked. All these Lucian, none of these say that they were Negroids. Plautius, Diogenes, Constantine of Volney, and then of course he travels there, and then he recounts himself, Champollion and his brother, George Rawlinson, Grafton Elliott. No, there's a few moderns too that they probably would love to throw on here that are reaping the money off of black people who believe this racist lie and get all wound up about it. But of course, any black people that we would be referring to wouldn't be related in any way, shape, or form to West African primitives, but they want to be related so bad, and you can see how far away in genetics that things can be. And this is not even a correct representation of anything on a correct scale here, but anyhow, Old Kingdom through New Kingdoms, and they've done genetic tests on this, which I can show you the genetics of. Here he says most white supremacists are critical of Herodotus simply because he himself stated that the Egyptians were black Africans. No, he didn't. No, he never said such. In fact, if you look at old Herodotus's maps, he didn't even know sub-Saharan Africa exists. His maps all just round off at the Sahara and say right up there at the end there is darker skinned people, and it seems like people get tanner and tanner if they're farmers or if they are closer to the sun, and they realize that where they were way up closer to the Arctic Circle and other people were way down closer to the equator. And but other Greek philosophers at the time knew the world was round and there would be a southern hemisphere and so on out in the abyss. In fact, that's what the horn used to be called, is Abyssinia, the abyss. And that goes with a lot of Sumerian things too that we've talked about if you've been paying attention. But this idea and concept that they didn't understand the world was round, Eratosthenes knew the world was round, and he measured it real close to the same rate. Now, was Herodotus in agreement with that at this time, or in good knowledge of it? No, it doesn't look like so. But also, he in fact, in his histories, he tells you that the Phoenicians went around the Horn of Africa, all the way around, and even kind of draws it on his map as being, they just went around there, and they said when they went around there, the sun was on the other side of their boat, And I myself don't believe such things. And so, what's this recanting? Well, he went past the equator to where the sun was on the other side of the boat. They went all the way down past the equator and back up. They clearly say that. And they're like, that's poppycock, or whatever. But anyhow, they mention it. Ancient Phoenicians, sailors. So he doesn't say that they were black. But this denial from white supremacists, of course, blacks always want to call people white supremacists, Nazis, and racist, whenever what we're listening to here is neo-Nazi Negro babble and black supremacist crap. And racist as hell. And whites can't help the fact that they ended up heralding mankind. But we're not going to slow down because other people are mad about it. We're spacemen now, and we're gonna continue. Yeah, I heard they went to space and back now. Yeah, I heard it. They can fly, but then they went to space and back now. Just something I heard. But so this white supremacist stems from colonial times where Europeans were introduced the false narrative of Africans never creating anything. No, I think we had interactions back in the slave trade and everything. People have been over there, been all through it, and what they had, and the ancient cities that had all gone to ruin. Yeah, that really now all you can show is some ancient ruins, and a lot of that was heralded by earlier slavers. The people talk about it like when the Americas were found, they started grabbing black people, and it's like, no. The Islamic slave trade started well over 900 years before the Americas were even found. Again. Of course, before that, they were found by Caucasians before, and I've got video stuff which shows the Sumerians actually making it all over there in reed boats, and perhaps the Egyptians too, for they've been known to have cocaine and tobacco in their body, and it doesn't make any sense because those are things from the New World. But that's in another video I've already made, or I've said a couple of them, and then I made one about a series about Thor Heyerdahl and so on that goes with it, and a few other videos that show some links, but it's kind of what I do is piece them together. As long as you've seen them, the more you see, the more links you get. So he tells you, which I debunked in my 2 recent videos. He didn't debunk anything whatsoever. He likes to think that he did. They want to say 1 or 2 things and then act like they did. Here's the quote here that we have actually from Herodotus himself. He tells you, for the fact is, as I soon came to realize myself, and then heard from others later, because he was kind of proud in this, that the Colchians were obviously Egyptian. When the notion occurred to me, I asked both the Colchians and the Egyptians about it, and found that the Colchians had better recall of the Egyptians than the Egyptians did of them. It's from antiquity. Some Egyptians said they thought the Colchians were originated with Sesostris' army. That's whenever he read up a campaign. I've done a couple of videos on it too, but I myself guess their Egyptian origin. So he's happy about this. Not only because the Colchians are dark-skinned and curly-haired, which does not account for much by itself, because these features are common in others too. So notice that. And he even did the non-Negroid transcription, dark-skinned and curly-haired. He's not talking about Bantu knots, he's talking about not straight-haired. Right here near this, he talks about the people in India and how their hair is extremely straight-looking, right? And it is kind of very straight-looking in southern India. Those people are real dark-skinned, and he talks about how there's correlations to that, but doesn't make that connection with Egyptians at the time. He makes Egyptian connections with Caucasus Mountain people here. The black people want to try to twist that. Let's continue. But more importantly, because the Colchians, Egyptians, and Ethiopians are the only people in the world who practice circumcision and have done so, have always done so, or done since earliest times. Now, here he goes with his, all of a sudden we're albinos, people. Even though we can get so dark tan, it's not even funny. You can get so dark tan playing golf, you'll look as dark as Tiger Woods, but Albinos, well, now Tiger Woods is kind of half Asian anyhow, isn't he? And then his dad is like part Caucasian from way back when. But albinos will deny all facts and evidence to withhold the asinine idea that they were ancient Egyptians. Talk about we was caves. He tries to make fun of his own we was. That's disgusting. Now they're double flipping on themselves. You see this? And he wants to call whites albinos. It's kind of disgusting. You know, if whites started referring to blacks as not Negroes, because whites aren't albinos, they're Caucasian. So we have Caucasian and Negroes. What could we call black people that would be other than albinos? I mean, we could make up some disgusting things, and we don't want to do that. So we don't want you to try to yap and say albino, because there's more black albinos per capita than there is Caucasians. The only problem is they eat them to this day. Yep, look it up. Tanzania has an extreme problem with it right now to this day. In a few other countries, it's not like under widespread. It's because they feel like they're magic. The people with the light skin are magic. You see, they can fly now. But that's something that people in America, a few generations, all of a sudden they're just totally denying their past, and they weren't them. They were the Egyptians. You see, this is what we're getting to. So let's take a look at this here for a second. If we just simply go to the wiki page, of course everybody, our wiki. No, if we just go to the wiki page and we look at what the ancient Greeks, Ethiopia of the Greeks, known as Ethiopia, first appears in blah blah blah. It's in the Iliad, it's in all these stories, and they mention it in a bunch of Greek stories, if anybody ever read the Greek stories. And when they do, they've talked about all kinds of areas. They've talked about areas all the way up here and through the farmland and valleys here and way over here there's some Ethiopians, and way over here. And if you'll look at this map, there's no sub-Saharan Africa. This isn't the one that shows the drawing of Necho 2 and showing them going all the way around like that. But also they talk about them being over in here some, in the farming areas. And then they talk about it being over here in India. And then down here is the Eastern Ethiopians. Like it says Ethiopians here. Now they say Meroe, and he draws it way up here, and the Nile comes all the way over to here. And it shows Atlantis on his ancient map too, and where he thought that was in Tartaria. But Tartaria's here, yeah, of the Bible and stuff, Tartarus. And then you have Tartarians way the hell over here. It's not even shown on this map here. But Bactria and the horse people and stuff and all the stuff that's over there. So I already knew about the Eurasian steppe people and Proto-Indo-Europeans for sure. In fact, they're part of them. So, in fact, they're just recanting history and looking through it all. And it really doesn't have anything to do with people that aren't even on the map down over here. Really at all. It doesn't until much later. And I don't think they like that, but hey, they've got all of that lower part of Africa. Only problem is that all the upper part of Africa has always been primordial Caucasians, all the way around the Mediterranean. There's nothing stopping here with that river. A river never stopped Caucasians before, and it didn't stop them at that time, and nothing did stop them. But there was a huge Sahara Desert that developed here that did kind of keep things separated for a good long time. Let's continue, though. So if we just look up Caucasian Egyptian, blue eyes, you'll end up getting a lot of these ended up pictures, photographs that people have made of all these different things, and just a decent showing here. There's Sumerians. Right here's the ancient Sumerians. Yep. In fact, most all of the ancient Sumerian stuff has old ancient blue eyes on it. But you can find it in Egyptian art as well as this one. Whoops, one crystal fell out. I'll show you some more. Green eyes and blue eyes from there. All over Sumeria. You look here in the priest and so on. But this is early Sumerian, but they have it in with the, early Egyptian, but they have it in with the Sumerians. There's also an early priest king named as Narmer that looked just like this too, from a little earlier than this time here. That's actually been found too, which is in the Louvre Museum, but people don't like that idea. They don't like the idea that these people could be Caucasians somehow, but who else would it be? You know, these are white Caucasian Sumerians. Who were all the people who were there at the time? Not the people that are there now, but who were there. And so you can see, well, hooked up here with the swastika, and it's been in a few of my videos recently. But here's ancient, this is Hor right here. Horaha right here, with his blue crystal eyes, Sumerians and so on. But then there's Nefertiti, and she still has a blue eye. The other one's gone. Ancient scribes and so on. Yeah, Buddha himself. Yeah, there's all kinds of statues that show this, all mixed through. And the mummies that have blonde, orange, and red hair, and they've looked at them under a microscope, and of course, all this flowing hair, that's not black hair, that's these ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans that we keep talking about here. And you can see how dark tan they can get just getting out in the sun. The guy lives near LA now, and look at the tan that they can get. That's the Egyptian kind of color. But then there's Nefertiti. Boy, they threw a fit whenever they saw the recreation of her. But why, when you look like this, and the recreation does look kind of like that, but does look a lot like her too, doesn't it? And all the Peru mummies. But then this one that's right here is a Tocharian, and that's from way up in China and India, and blue-eyed Buddhas. Yeah, and all the ancient scribes of Egypt and so on. Blue-eyed Wari mummies. The oldest mummies in the world are found there. They predate the Egyptians. I did a lead-in on it, and I never did a whole video on it, but hey, here's one from 7 Phoenician 7. This is Isis. This is way back a few hundred years before the Hyksos show up, but blacks always want to say that this is from the forward Greek period, but that's Isis. She's always drawn as a pale goddess, and the women are pale and the men are drawn tan, and it's a symbolic thing. And you can see all the blue-eyed ones that are mixed in there, and then the blonde and red-haired ones that are all shown here that are all quite famous. The reason it's all kind of mulled over somewhat is that the current inhabitants don't really have that effect to them. Here's an ancient scribe. I believe this is from 6th dynasty, and it's kind of mushed up. It looks terrible. You can't really tell what's going on, except for there's a piece of skin still left here in his lip, and he's got this little thin mustache, right? But look at his blue eyes, staring you down. Yeah, and this famous scribe that I've done a video on. I did one where it talks about what a scribe does, but again, this one, which I've seen blacks tout because, oh, he looks like he's chubby like a black man. It's like he's chubby like a white guy. He's got blue eyes, but oh, blacks can get blue eyes too. No, come on, man. That's a genetic defect, or you've got Caucasian admix. Now you're begging for a mulatto. Look at that. Yep, she's got a blue eye. Can you see it in that picture? Yeah, you can see it there. Yeah, what color is that? See, that's blue, and that's blue. You know, you can go look at her statue. But oh, this is from one of my vids. Doesn't show up as well in there, but that's his blue eyes. So can black people get blue eyes? Sure, there's a genetic effect that'll cause it, but here's pre-dynastic Nakata period. I've showed a bunch of this stuff here recently, so this is not gonna cut it. Black people match the Nubians, not the Egyptians. And we've been over this so much, and it's been debunked for so long, but black people keep this crap up. It's gotten to where it's past disgusting. It's turned to where they just like to be racist and yap a whole lot. Wow, that's from one of my vids right there. Yeah, yeah, Egyptian pharaohs, red, blonde, and blue-eyed. So, yeah. And you want to talk about Jesus? Now he's supposed to be from the Middle East, and he would look brown. Oh yeah, well, here's a Caucasian from there that looks like that, from the area. Yeah, area, like Iranians, Aryans, these people. Ooh, it's another one of my vids right here too. It's actually, this is the one that I redid her Seven Phoenician Sevens video, where blue-eyed Egyptian mummies, where this guy keeps yelling, "There ain't no blue-eyed, pale-skinned Egyptians," and she keeps showing blue-eyed and pale-skinned Egyptians. Yeah, there's Brahma Man. They've made a mockery of Cheddar Man and stuff too, but let's go back to what this guy is trying to say here. Way back over here. So again, we're back here. He called all Caucasians albinos, and they will deny the facts and evidence, withhold the asinine idea of the ancient Egyptians. Talk about we was caves. It's like, really, talk about we was mocking and mimicking, like the Bible, which doesn't mention black people either. Let's continue. Hamites, northern African Caucasians. Egyptians. Look up Hamites in the dictionary. Greek scholars depicted Africa as being a place of knowledge. Sure they did. Although they mention multiple times that their civilization is the product of Egyptian cultural influence and Phoenician influence. No, man, they all kind of shared together some of their aspects, but each one had a different, Egypt had this thing with their gods, and it was a sacred group with Horus and Shimsu-Hor and the followers of Horus. And the Greeks had this thing where their gods were up on a mountain. But ironically, I've shown you quite a few times in my series that I've run here that the Greeks' gods weren't just gods of that little mountain someplace, but they were gods all over the place, including North Africa, like Dionysus and stuff. So, no, not so much. And of course, they always want to say, "Oh, they stole it from Egypt, and Egypt are blacks, so they stole all their knowledge from blacks." I'm like, well, how come y'all don't have any of the knowledge? Well, shut up, Whitey. And it's like, dude, just cut it with the jealous lies. But we continue. Most of them admitted that continental Africa influence on Egypt's civilization is wide and deep. Yes, we also admit that all of North Africa was Caucasian, wide and deep. You look up the definition of Caucasians, and it shows you they run all the way to the Horn of Africa. I don't have to stop just to go see that right now. But so now here we have Diodorus. So he says, now the Ethiopians. So now here we go with another Herodotus thing where it's really a bunch of hearsay, where they go, now these people say this, now those people say that. This isn't like, hey, this is the way it is. But they want to try to use this. Here we go. Now the Ethiopians, as historians relate, were the first of all men, and the proofs of this statement, they say, are manifest. So they say. For they did not come into their land as immigrants from abroad, across waters, but were natives of it, and so justly bear the name autochthones. So this means endemic people. Is they maintain, conceded by practically all men, furthermore, that those who dwell beneath the noonday sun were in all likelihood the first to be generated by the earth. So they're thinking that the people that were closer to the sun happened first, just on like a science experiment, and put some beans in a jar or something, okay? But let's go with that here. The first to be generated by the earth, it is clear to all, since inasmuch as it was the warmth of the sun, which at the generation of the universe dried up the earth when it was still wet and impregnated it with life. It is reasonable to suppose that the region which was nearest to the sun was the first to bring forth living creatures. And I'm not sure if black people, when they keep recanting this, don't realize, but during the last ice age, ice encroached from the south up and from the north down, and people lived a lot closer to the equator than they did now. And of course they talk about the great cataclysm there and how mankind had come forth from that again, right? And so they saw themselves as being this newer thing that had happened from about 10,000 BC that we keep talking about, and this cataclysm type thing that all of these Proto-Indo-Europeans have knowledge of, right? From an earlier time, from about then or around the time of Göbekli Tepe. So, but this is what they say, and they used to believe, yeah, the closer to the sun, maybe you started first. He says we must now speak about the Ethiopian writing, which is called hieroglyphic among the Egyptians, which is an ideogram, so it's not quite the same as Phoenician and Greek. Greek is just backwards Phoenician, but written left to right instead of right to left, so they made the characters backwards. It's a simplistic thing, but they did it through merchant and mercantile, and to be able to tell, I guess, who's who. In fact, the Hebrew language is also a derivative out of that. So let's continue. In order that we may omit nothing on a discussion of antiquities, they, the Ethiopians, say, so they say, also that the Egyptians are colonists sent out by the Ethiopians. What if it's those Sumerian Ethiopians I just showed in the Ethiopia of the Greeks? Because it's what I've shown in a bunch of videos here recently. Osiris, king of kings and god of gods, having been the leader of that colony. And I think I showed that, and how he had been killed off in an earlier time, and then now we saw the followers of Horus, and how he had satiated it, settled it, and then there was the followers of Shem-Su-Hor. But let's continue. They add that the Egyptians have received from them as from authors and their ancestors the greater part of their laws, and this is the laws like Hammurabi's Code and the laws that the Sumerians had way before. They were the first people to record laws, the first people to have writing. They were the ones with the hieroglyphics, the old ideograms. They didn't have the circles around them to denote kings and so on at that point. This is a different culture pulled out of it, but cuneiform comes from them. Reed boats come from them. We've been there and watch a few of my recent videos. Just look up Origins of Ancient Egypt under my thing, and you'll see a few different ones. Watch a few. It's got some important people actually correlating this data. It's not just me who's been finding this for a long time. So Diodorus cleared intention to trace the origins of the cult of Osiris, alias the Greek Dionysus, like I said, also commonly known by his Roman name Bacchus. So these are like the same type of thing, and the Romans and Greek gods, everybody knows that's the same thing. But the Homeric hymn locates the birth of Dionysus in a mysterious city called Nyasa, near the streams of Aegyptus, and that was in Hesiod in 287. Now, I've got a video coming up, which I realize now, reading this, that I still have not done from last Christmas, which shows you the two brothers, and one of them is named Egyptus, and they both are from way back in the Greek pantheon, from way back when in Egypt, and where that name comes from is not Egypt itself. That's a Greek name, and we realize that that's the Greek name. And the Nile River, or Nilus, they called it, used to be called the R. Yeah, and so what would you call a people living along a river called R? Right, let's just continue. Because Herodotus does tell you that all the people in that area were called Aryans at the time, till Medes came to the Medianite people from Athens, and they changed their name, just as Persia had done when Perses had come to him. So here we go again. So this shows you a leading of mankind and grouping and getting people together in city-states and getting their idea together, and so they could do better trade. So everybody's on the same page. There's still a people sub-Saharan that aren't quite on this page though at this time, and they want to interject themselves way into pages, but they didn't have writing. They really did not have writing. Diodorus cites this reference as well as the ancient belief that Dionysus was the son of Ammon, and Ammon is right there in Libya, in the edge of it. Of course, all of Africa was really called Libya when Egypt was called Egypt, and there really wasn't even called Africa yet. Africa was named after a Caucasian leader that had come through there, and they named the land after him because they considered it to be the primordial lands they'd come from after what they had learned. And so we're talking about that now. And people talk about the out of Africa and in and out of Africa and out of Africa and back in, back out of Africa that happened in primordial times before the last ice age. But of course these people recanting now were after that fact and looking back at it. The Egyptians themselves looked back and figured out that the Greeks predated them by about 1,000 years later. But nobody wants to point that out either. Anyhow, so Ammon, the king of Libya, and much of Book 3 of the Bibliotheca Historica, or Library of History, is devoted to the intertwined histories of Dionysus and the god-favored Ethiopians, who he believed to be the originators of Egypt's civilization, who is not the Ethiopians that you're thinking of at the top of the Nile. Which brown blotch is it? It's the one over near the Sumerian ones, where that had come from. Something that's definitely hidden now, and then you look at it in Babylon, the Whore of Babylon, and all that stuff. But that's where it all came from. That's where it was when it flooded. And they have stories about that. They have stories about their Noah as Utnapishtim, releasing doves the whole 9 yards. It all goes with that. So, but they want to attach themselves to Ethiopians. By the way, the current Ethiopians are about 40% Caucasian admix. But I'm telling you, in ancient days, they weren't. In fact, in ancient days, there were Caucasians all the way through the Horn of Africa. Wiki Caucasians, Caucasian race, and it'll tell you, blah, 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 Horn of Africa. So let's substantiate Diodorus' theory with actual biological facts. Oh, please do so. Oh, they're going to show this picture. He's got to show this picture and stuff. And of course, Teferal and Alufu people and stuff are showing up to be Caucasians. There's a new book out, a new whole study they've done to the full genomes of the Green Sahara Project, and it's not a Negroid. This was one that was done that strangely, it's got a small nasal slit that's less the width of even the center part of the nose, much less the whole thing that's as wide as his whole face. And you couldn't have been able to even make that breathe the way they try to show this picture here, but they want to show you that forensic. They don't want to show you other forensic. Anyhow, so Luzia, and I've showed you a picture of Luzia, and they would go, yeah, see, that's black, and then you go, this person is not black. Yeah, the one that they'll even agree to sometimes. People of African descent are more genetically diverse than Middle Easterners. Now, here's the weird thing. Whenever they hear that statement, they think, oh, well, blacks. And no, they're talking about Caucasians, but they're also talking about the fact that Africa has so much diversity in it because, like everywhere else, there's only Caucasians, and then you have Mongoloids, which are variations of that, and then you have, the Asians, and that's part of Caucasians, but the blacks are something different. So, of course, there's more diversity in there automatically. But yet, then you look at the blacks, and there's no continuity between any of them with the Khoisan and all the people here and here and here and here, and they're genetically able to tell you real easy with the DNA test kind of where you come from or your mix, from way back when, from after the slave trade. But more diverse, yeah. So Middle Easterners who are more diverse than Asians and Europeans. So Europeans have more of a continuity. Native Americans possess the least diverse genomes. And yet we know that the Hopi Indians are way different from an Apache, right? People, if they have any idea. Now, Navajo, that's kind of close. Well, what about, and so there's variations on a theme that are going there too. Just like there's variations on a theme in the Caucasians that lead to this whole area. But, hey, if this thing kicks it, I'll do a second part, but it probably won't be that long. Anyhow, as a result, searching for disease-causing genes should require the fewest number of genetic markers among Native Americans and the greatest number among Africans. Well, you would think so, but then again, it doesn't work that way to Negroids because they're relatively new on the thing. The oldest Negroid skull of a modern Negroid is like 4600 BC, and shortly before that, when they find them, they're all proto-Negroid form, and that only goes, the oldest one they found of that is like 9100 BC. And they keep wanting to, try to point out all these people and stuff, and it's like they're not really talking about you in most of these things, and of course most of these European sites for sure not. But hell, we were all over the place, and so then they're copping out to being Homo erectus, and it's like, please stop, just stop. Anyhow, to validate this point, Africa before Arab, Greco-Assyrian, and